Our first character input exercise is called Counting Characters, if you believe ChatGPT. I think maybe a better title is Counting Alphabetical Characters, because we're actually only counting a certain kind of character. And if we were just counting all characters, the exercise might be a little bit too easy for us, because we've already seen that exercise in the lectures. All right, so I'll copy this. We'll head over here. We'll paste that in as our exercise. There it is. We'll just format this a little bit better. And so when I read this and when I see the number of alphabetic characters, whether this is grammatically better or not, I'm going to say this just, executive decision. We'll call that alphabetical characters. It just feels better. So I'm reading characters using getchar, and I'm counting the number of alphabetical characters, which is to say letters, that the user has entered. Now, for this purpose, I'm going to bring in ctype.h. So I want to be able to ask the question, is a particular character, a letter or not? And to do that, I want to use the library function isAlpha. Now, we already know, if you're watching this after having seen the lecture on character input, we know that there are ways of doing this by hand, but basically we shouldn't. We have a library function for it. The library function is more likely to handle every possible case correctly, even cases that we haven't yet thought of. So yes, there is a way of doing this by hand, but it's clunky, and maybe it's not going to work if there are differences in things like character sets, which frankly is a bit rare, but still, we want to use the library functions that are provided to us. So I'm going to use the isAlpha function, and recall that the isAlpha function returns true if the character you provide to it as an argument, so the isAlpha function you would call with some character C as the argument, if the character you provide as an argument is a letter, whether it's uppercase or lowercase, isAlpha returns true. Remember that returning true in this context means returning a number other than 0. If the character is not a letter, then it returns false, which is to say it returns 0. So what I'm going to want is a loop that reads characters from the user until they enter a new line character. And then as it reads them, it's going to keep track of how many of them were letters, how many of them were alphabetical characters. So I'm going to keep a count for that, so I'll call it alpha count, and we'll set that to 0. And then I'm going to keep a variable to store the character that I've read from getchar. So I'm going to write, I think, a pretty typical getchar loop here. So I'll call getchar once at the beginning of the program. The way the prompt is written, it doesn't say I should ask the user, enter some characters. So I'm just going to have the program start and with a prompt. That is, it's going to start and just wait for input. It's not going to tell the user what to do. Okay, so now I'm going to keep going as long as the character that I just read is not equal to my new line. So if I hit a new line, I'm immediately going to stop. And then at each iteration of this loop, I've got a new character that I just read from the user, and I'm going to ask the question, if isAlpha of ch is not equal to 0. So remember that isAlpha returns 0 if the character is not a letter. If it returns anything other than 0, then the character is a letter. So ch is a letter. All right, so if ch is a letter, then I add 1 to my alpha count. Alpha count plus equals 1. We'll use the plus equals operator for a change. And then at the end of each iteration of my while loop, I'm going to read the next character. So this is the third ingredient of my loop. Up here I've got my initialization, there's my continuation condition, and down here is the equivalent of incrementation, a way to make progress, get the next character. And then at the end of the program, I'm going to print out the count of how many alphabetical characters were read. The number of alphabetical characters, I could just say letters, but ChatGPT says alphabetical. Number of alphabetical characters read is, or was, and then I'll print that out, and I'll print out alpha count. All right, so we'll try compiling this. Looks like it compiled, and then we'll try running it. And we can see, just like I said earlier, it's just going to sit there and wait for me to enter some input. So let's start by this, ASDF, press enter, and it read 4 characters. Okay, so obviously we have to do a bunch more tests than just that. So I'll do A, B, C, D, and then I'm going to do I'll just do a bunch of random junk here, and then another underscore, and then E, F, G, H, and then press enter. And I should expect the answer to be 8, because all that stuff in the middle, obviously none of those things were letters. We'll try it again. This time we'll do some spaces. So there's 8 characters. There's 5 more characters, bringing us to 13. Here's a whole bunch of spaces. And there's 5 more characters. I guess this should be 18 characters in total. Looks like it was. And that example contained a mixture of lowercase and in at least one case of an uppercase letter. I guess I'll do one more that does more of a mixture. So we'll do hello, W-O-R-L-D. Okay, so it still read 10 alphabetical characters. And between all of these, I guess I should also do a case where I enter 0 alphabetical characters. So we'll just enter some non-alphabetical junk here and then press enter, and it read 0. And I think between all these cases, I think I've covered all the obvious bases. So first, I've got just letters. Here, I've got a mixture of letters and other stuff. Here, I've got a mixture of letters and spaces and other stuff. I guess I also have an uppercase letter there. Here, I've got uppercase and lowercase with one space. Here, I have no letters. I guess the only case I've missed is what if I have digits? So there's some digits. These are obviously not letters, and that comes out as 0 as well. So I think, short and sweet, I think I've got this exercise sorted out. So we can move on to exercise 2. I'm really excited for exercise 2.